Welcome to the Death in Custody Reporting Act System training. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to learn more about BJA's new effort to ensure compliance with the Act and to assist states with answering questions about the Act's reporting requirements. We have 3 agenda items in this training: a brief review of the Death in Custody Reporting Act, the Death in Custody Reporting System structure with the PMT, and frequently asked questions. We anticipate there being quite a few questions as we go through this training. Know that we will do our best to answer your questions today. However, there may be some that we are not able to answer at this time and will require further follow-up. We will document all of the questions that we are unable to answer and reply via email in the coming weeks. During this presentation, you will know more about the death in custody reporting requirements as the statute describes, as well as how BJA has implemented those requirements as they relate to JAG reporting. We will also have some time at the end to answer as many questions as we can and take back questions that we are not able to answer. In this part of the presentation, we will briefly introduce you to the Death in Custody Reporting Act. All deaths in a local or state correctional facility must be reported, as well as those occurring under arrest or during the process of an arrest. The state must collect data from all jurisdictions in their state, regardless of whether they have received a JAG award. This slide details the requirements per the statute and the circumstances and locations in which a reportable death is required to be reported. Note that a known crime or imminent charge is not a pre-qualifying event when determining if a death is reportable, so long as the decedent was in the process of being arrested or in custody. When a death has been determined to be reportable, the statute lays out certain data elements that are required, some of which are broad, so BJA has had to narrow them down for reporting purposes within the system. The name, gender, race, ethnicity, and age are all required data elements. The law enforcement agency, or in the case of jail and prisons, the name of the correctional agency where the reportable death took place, as well as a description of the circumstances, are also required. Will there be a JAG penalty, which is mandatory, for not reporting? The statute authorizes a 10% penalty on JAG for noncompliance at the discretion of the Attorney General. The amount of the penalty may be used to set up systems to comply with the Death in Custody Reporting Act. It will be up to the department's leadership to determine if penalties will be imposed at this time or in the future. Now let's take a minute to look at a brief history of the Death in Custody Reporting Act and its resulting data collections. The first Death in Custody Reporting Act was signed into law in 2000. BJS started the arrest-related deaths and mortality in corrections reporting programs as a result. DCRA of 2000 expired in 2006, but BJS continued its arrest-related deaths program until 2014. In 2015, the FBI began working with state and local law enforcement and decided to discuss the possibility of starting a use of force data collection program. In 2016, on a separate track, the Department of Justice decided that BJA should be responsible for Death in Custody Reporting Act data collection. In 2019, BJA received OMB approval to start collecting data, meaning ultimately that BJA is taking over the mandate from BJS to collect death in custody reporting data from states. There are 3 similar data collection efforts to the Death in Custody Reporting Act, each with a slightly different focus and purpose. The BJS Mortality and Correctional Institutions Program, the FBI's Use of Force Program, and the CDC's Vital Statistics Program. Their differences are highlighted here, but here is an example of a reportable death under DCRA, but not in one of these other data collection systems. A person dies during the process of an arrest from a heart attack. Under the DCRA, this is a separate reportable death. but it is not a reportable death under the use of force program, for example. Now let's get into the structure of the Death in Custody Reporting Act questionnaire as it exists in the PMT. The designee that will compile and report DCRA data on behalf of the state must have access to the PMT and be associated with the JAG awards. Reporting will go live in the beginning of 2020 for the October through December 2019 reporting period. If you have not started data collection or do not have any reportable deaths, you can complete these reporting requirements so that you can complete your JAG report by telling us that you did not have any reportable deaths, which will be in a later slide. The required data elements in the DCRA module track closely with what is required by law. States will need to establish their own procedures for collecting this information from local and state law enforcement and correctional agencies. You have the option to select no if you have no records to enter. Otherwise, enter the number of records for decedents that you have to enter after you select yes to question 1. To enter the Decedent Information tab, the number of decedents or reportable deaths you have will be reported in the quarter and should be entered in C. This will then populate the number of records in the Decedent Information tab. Select Save or Save and Continue often so that you don't lose your work. When you select the Decedent Information tab, you will see a number of blank records that you will have to complete. At this time, decedent information has to be entered one at a time. Decedent records are presented in an accordion style with their name and agency or arresting jurisdiction as the label. You can toggle between records as you enter the data. Hitting Save will move you to the next decedent record. Save and Continue moves you to the review page. As noted before, the required data elements in the DCRA module track closely with what is required by law. All demographic information is presented here. Unknown values are available if you do not know a person's race or ethnicity. However, you should endeavor to use those sparingly if possible. The birth year should be entered as 4 digits. Here we ask about the date of the incident or arrest and the date of the death. If in a facility such as a jail or prison, that can be entered here as well. The system will indicate if a field is mandatory or not. Lastly, we ask about the manner of death. Note that we have an unavailable investigation pending option. You can use this when you are still gathering facts around the certain circumstances of the death. When all the facts are known and you can make a determination as to the manner of death, the record must be updated. Note that when a mistake has been made, such as creating a duplicate record, we have a clear decedent information link that will clear all of the fields on the form. Now let's do a quick review. Please respond to the following polling question on the right side of the screen. Is an affirmative no response required for DCRA reporting, even if we have no reportable deaths before you complete your JAG report? Yes or no? Looks like 64% of you said selected A, yes, and that is the correct answer. An affirmative response, if you have no reportable deaths, meaning you select no, that is required before you can complete your JAG report. In other words, you have to do something. You cannot leave it as nothing. You have to do something affirmative to respond to the DCRA every quarter. Now let's get into a few questions that have already been asked, then we will finish with some time to answer some of your questions. Does this take the place of other federal data collection systems that collect similar data? As previously discussed, this does not take the place of any other federal data collection systems. BJA is collecting this information from states to fulfill a federal mandate. This data is not combined with or shared with other federal agencies, even if the data overlaps. Will there be a bulk upload feature? A bulk upload will help populous states with large numbers of deaths in custody to report. BJA is currently working with its developers to implement this feature. A firm rollout date will be communicated to the field when we have it. What if the team tasked with collecting DCRA data is not the same as the JAG PMT contact? States that have a different point of contact for the JAG and DCRA will need to ensure their PMT access gives them access to the JAG awards and the DCRA module. Please contact the PMT help desk so that we can ensure the correct representatives have access to DCRA. Given the time lapse between identifying a potential death in custody and obtaining confirmation of a death in custody, when does BJA want us to report deaths? Report the decedent information when you hear about a potential death when investigation is still pending at the time of reporting. You will note that we have the unavailable investigation pending status. The record can then be updated when it has been confirmed. Here's the BJA PMT Help Desk contact information. Our office hours are Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, except U.S. federal holidays. We strive to return everybody's email and phone call within 24 hours, so please don't hesitate to leave a voicemail or email, even after business hours. We'll leave this webinar open for about 5 to 10 minutes so you can download any handouts attached or use the Q&A box if you have questions. A recording of today's training and other user materials and resources will be posted online. Lastly, we will be hosting a follow-up training on DCRA in January 2020, so in 2 months. Look for more information to come on that training where we will take some of the questions and concerns that we have received from the first few weeks of live system reporting and try to help you all as best as possible by answering further questions. On behalf of BJA and the PMT team, thank you for your time, dedication, and hard work. This concludes the presentation, and we will now respond to questions.